Is Dak a top 10 quarterback
No.
this season?
Dak is not a top 10 quarterback. You look at the quarterbacks that they have mentioned in front of him. Rodgers, Mahomes, Allen, Tom Brady, Joe Burrow, Matthew Stafford, Herbert, Wilson, and Deshaun Watson. Nobody is taking Dak over those guys. As a matter of fact, I got the 3 honorable mention guys that finished after Dak. Lamar Jackson, Derek Carr, and Kyler Murray. All of those guys are ranked. I'm not taking Dak Prescott in front of any of those guys, Skip. And you've even mentioned down the stretch how inconsistent. I don't know what my quarterback's going to do. I don't know which of one of my quarterbacks is the guy that threw that had that great walk-off win against the New England Patriots, or the guy that scored 9 points in 12 possessions against the Kansas City Chiefs, the guy that was down 30-0 to start the fourth quarter against the Denver Broncos. So for me, Skip, no, I am not putting Dak Prescott, and I haven't put Dak Prescott in my top 10 because he's too inconsistent. We've dubbed him Prescottian, which means that they'll fall woefully behind by 14, 21 points. Dak throws for a bunch of yards, and then they win. And if you didn't watch the game and all you saw was the stats, you're like, man, Dak was unbelievable. But then you come to realize he was really never in the ball game. So for me, Skip, no, I do not think Dak is a top 10 quarterback. I'm surprised that somehow he snuck into the top 10. When you look at what Derek Carr's done, you look at Kyler Murray and Lamar Jackson, I think that, look, I get it. And I've been critical of not of Lamar Jackson, the player, but of his inconsistency to throw the football accurately. Dak Prescott suffered a lot of those same deficiencies. Although Lamar has won an MVP, I just don't see how you come to this conclusion. Dak is a good quarterback in a horrendous division. He's 6-0 last year against the NFC East. 17 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Against the rest of the league, including the playoffs, he's 5-6, 21 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. So it just goes to show you, when you play in that division, he's put up tremendous numbers, 17-3. 17-3, Skip Bayless. That's what? Damn, that's 5-1 touchdown interception ratio, which is great. If you had that against the league, you'd win MVP every year.
It's Rodgers-esque.
Very Rodgers-esque. So for me, Skip, and what I've seen from the second half of the season, he starts out fast and then he fades down the stretch. I just haven't seen the consistency of Dak Prescott that would warrant him being justified as a top 10 quarterback. I don't know how they came to this conclusion, that he's better than the 3 honorable mentions, but he damn sure shouldn't be in front of any of the guys that's mentioned in front of him. So for me, I do not think Dak is a top 10 quarterback. As a matter of fact, he should be 14th. I got him in the middle of the pack. I think I've always had him, for the most part, somewhere around 13, 14. There's no question in my mind he's the 13th or 14th best quarterback in this league, but nowhere near the top 10.
To all of your points, I begin my response with the first line of this ESPN.com ranking. The capsule under Dak Prescott, ranking 10th. Voters pointed to Prescott's consistency. Really?
When?
Consistency. Helping him beat out other top-tier passers here. One other insider, this an NFL offensive coach. All these are obviously anonymous quotes. Dak has good poise in the pocket. He's sturdy, always been deadly when they space the field and empty backfield,
Right.
No running back. Sometimes needs an extra hitch to confirm things, but he's typically a good decision maker in their drop back game. All that would point to model of consistency, right? Yet he's actually been more of a model of inconsistency.
Correct.
To me. And I think I started pointing that out to you before even you saw it. Because I cannot tell you, when you say I love hard, I can't express to you how hard I've tried to love this man. Mm-hmm. And I think you know that from the start of this show.
Yeah.
Because he's another one, a la 11 from heaven, who fell into our laps now 2 years ago.
Right.
Dak also fell out of heaven into our laps as a 4th-round pick.
Right.
Who, for significant stretches of his career, has played like the 4th overall pick in the draft. Right. And then, just when you want to trust him and believe in him and put all of your faith, all of your heart and soul in him, he suddenly reverts to playing like a 4th-round pick.
Right.
And at this point in time, I would have to lean toward you that he's closer to a 4th-round pick than he is to the 4th overall pick in overall performance. So the reason this man has so baffled me, has so confounded me, has so tormented me to the point of torturing me is if you recall 2016, you want to talk about starting off with a bang.
Yeah.
But he had his best buddy as his running mate. He had Ezekiel Elliott flat out coming straight out of The Ohio State and dominating the National Football League as a rookie.
Well, he was the best running back in the league as a rookie.
In the league as a rookie, he dominated. He led in rushing, and he actually led this team all the way to 13-3. And Dak was, to my way of thinking, extraordinary that first year because there's not much not to like. He finished 3rd in QBR that year, just behind Matt Ryan, who won the MVP. Which you somehow predicted because you had inside information. And 2nd on that list was this guy named Brady. And 3rd was the rookie 4th-round pick out of Mississippi State named Rain Dakota Prescott.
Right.
Really? Okay, so 3rd best QBR, and then he catapults all that into, they got the bye, obviously. They were the top
number 1 seed.
Yeah. And they get a home playoff game against, unfortunately, Aaron Rodgers.
A team that they had beat earlier. Was crowing for a week about that game.
Because both Zeke and Dak were rookie extraordinaires in that game. And Aaron Rodgers wasn't really very good in that game, and he's typically a Cowboy killer. Well, he turned back into just that in the home playoff game when my team wasn't ready and fell behind 21-3. That was under Jason Garrett, old 8-8 Jason. And yet, if you look hard at what happened in that game, Dak was really good in that game. 24-38 for 302, 3 touchdowns and a pick and a QBR of 74 on a scale 0 to 100. Trust me, for your first ever playoff game against Aaron Rodgers, it's pretty great. He brings them all the way back to a 31-all tie. What do you think I'm thinking? I'm out of my mind, right? And it took 2 intergalactic field goals, the 2 weirdest field goals I've seen in the history of field goal kicking by Mason Crossbar from 51 yards and 54 yards to win it.
Right.
And both of them looked like they were going to miss off his foot. One looked like it was a dying quail to the right, and the other one looked like a duck hook that suddenly moved back inside the left upright. Okay, so it took that, and it took that incredible 3rd and 32 play that Aaron pulls off to Jared Cook. It took all that to beat Dak Prescott that year, right?
Yeah, but Skip, what have you talked about? You even said you were down 21-3. That's been his MO. He falls woefully behind, have great numbers, and you look at it.
I thought the defense didn't show up, but to your point, he did get the football.
He did get the ball. You just said, you look at his numbers, he was 24-38, 302, this many touchdowns, only 1 pick. So if you just looked at the stats, but if you saw the first half, he was terrible. Went back great. That was the best offensive line in football.
It was. It just flat out was. I give you that.
They could pass block, they could run block. Tyler, Smith, the Smith kid, was at the peak of his powers. Zach Martin was unbelievable. He was de facto the best guard in football, and the center was one of the 2 best centers in football. So your offensive line was solidified. You could run it, you could throw it. And it was tailor-made. It was set up on a platter. Everybody, this is the year of the Cowboy. Troy Aikman, our former colleague here, was talking about how great this team looked. Reminded him of those 90s Cowboys with the ability to run it and throw the football. And then what happened? The same thing has happened. You go back and look at that 2016, and you look at it now. Fall woefully behind, have great numbers, but they lose. Throw for 447, they lose. Throw for 432, and they lose. Have the 2 highest throwing single season game and back-to-back. And what?
Okay. If I'd ask you this question, and I will also remind you, we ended up shooting a commercial in that offseason that was based upon Dak's rookie year, where I was just crowing about it, saying it was the greatest rookie year I'd ever seen, because it was.
Okay. Okay. And because of what happened the next year,
And because of what happened the next year,
2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025, 2026, 2027, 2028, 2029, 2030, 2031, 2032, 2033, 2034, 2035, 2036, 2037, 2038, 2039, 2040, 2041, 2042, 2043, 2044, 2045, 2046, 2047, 2048, 2049, 2050, 2051, 2052, 2053, 2054, 2055, 2056, 2057, 2058, 2059, 2060, 2061, 2062, 2063, 2064, 2065, 2066, 2067, 2068, 2069, 2070, 2071, 2072, 2073, 2074, 2075, 2076, 2077, 2078, 2079, 2080, 2081, 2082, 2083, 2084, 2085, 2086, 2087, 2088, 2089, 2090, 2091, 2092, 2093, 2094, 2095, 2096, 2097, 2098, 2099, 2000, 2001
that commercial got pulled and never aired after we spent an entire Saturday.
Entire Saturday,
we
yes.
spent like, what, 8 hours, 10 hours, whatever it was, making this commercial.
Right.
We shot lines over and over and over and over again till we thought we got something, or at least they thought they had something. And it never aired because Zeke ended up getting suspended.
Correct.
And once Zeke went out for not 2 games, 6 games.
Correct.
It was a 6-game suspension. If you start looking at what started happening, remember they went to Atlanta and they couldn't block
Claiborne
coming off the edge.
Yeah.
And Dak just got annihilated in that game. So they lose that game, and then here we go, and the QBRs go 14-20. Then he bounced back 60 and 89, wound up with 63. Anyway, he winds up for that stretch with a QBR of 49, which is one below average.
Mm-hmm.
And he reverted back to a little below average as a quarterback, including the debacle of a Thanksgiving Day game at home. We've had a bunch of those lately against Phillip Rivers and the Chargers. Remember this one?
Yes.
And they just looked incompetent. That they looked non-competitive in that game. They just couldn't compete. And Dak was horrendously bad.
Right.
So it shook my foundation because it shook my faith in him. But then now we spin into 2018, and he's struggling early, and then Jerry pulls off the trade of the year. He goes and gets Amari. Okay, it cost him, but he got it.
Right.
And they stunk it up the first game when Amari hadn't been able to practice against Tennessee on Monday night at home. Remember?
Yep.
That was a debacle.
Yep.
And yet, then they go to Philadelphia against their arch rival next week, and they win, and they take off. And Dak took off because down the stretch, he was one of the, he was top 3 quarterback with Amari Cooper as the new security blanket. He beats Russell Wilson in a home playoff game, and then he played very well against the Rams in a game that they just couldn't stop the run in. So it was the defense's fault, but I thought Dak played well enough to win the game if he'd had a semblance of a defense. So my point is, with Amari, now he's flipped back into it. If we'd ranked him after that year ended, you would have at least put him in the top 10. You would have put him close to the top 5.
Yeah, but those other guys weren't in the league. Kyler Murray and Lamar Jackson wasn't in the league at the time, Skip.
Okay.
And if you look at what Dak has had early in his career, he's always had a very solid offensive line. Now, it's not what it once was, but it's still a very, very good offensive line. They had a dominant run game his first 3 years. Now, they've kind of morphed away from that and become a passing team with the weapons that they put around him in the passing game. So it's not like Dak has had, bad players around him. He's had very good players around him.
Okay.
He hasn't been able to cash that in. At some point in time, Skip, you've got to be able to pay it off. You told me he's making $40 million. Now, at $40 million,
he made 75.
Okay, he made 75.
Bonus.
He made $75 million last year. At some point in time, Skip, it's not going to be just good enough to win the division and go out in the first round. If you're that dude, if you're top 10, you've got to advance at some point in time past the first round.
Okay, I got it. So let's spin forward now. I just went through 2018. Let's get to 2019, shall we? Because it's more to your point. Speaking of getting the bag.
Yes.
Okay, so the first 3 games of 2019 are against what you called ultimately garbage teams.
I told you that one.
And Dak put on a 4th of July fireworks display in September.
Yeah, he put a clinic on.
He led the league in QBR after 3 games, and Jerry thought he had a handshake, a verbal deal with Todd France, the fairly new agent at that point. And all of a sudden, the deal was off the table because Dak and company are saying, wait a second, hold the phone, Jerry. We think we're about to deserve a whole lot more. We're going to bet on ourselves.
Dak pulled an Elon Musk on you.
He did.
He backed out of the deal.
He backed out of the deal. And guess what? He backed right into trouble because he bet on himself. And actually, to my way of thinking, he lost. Because down the stretch that year, they went 5-8, and he stunk and stunk and stunk worse. And yet, Jerry got backed into a contractual corner because there was no... Well, the only way out was to cut bait.
Yes.
You're going to have to just cut bait. Brady was on the market. I kept saying, well, just go get Brady then. If you don't believe in this man to the tune of $75 million in the first year, go get somebody else or just start over, because don't throw good money after bad, which is what you're about to do if you don't believe.
Right.
Okay, since that point when they started 3-0 that year in 2019, just for the record, Dak's starting quarterback record since the 3-0 start in 2019 is 17-17. Now, that's not all his fault because he obviously needs the defense to play and people to play around him and the offensive line to not age quite as quickly as it did. But think about that. Since that first 3 games in 2019, he's 17-17. Well, now we're back to 4th-round pick play.
Well, that's not top 10.
No, well, it's definitely not top 10. Yet, and still, this is where you get tormented by this man. If we look at the totality of last season, obviously he got hurt the year before, so he only played 4 games, didn't finish the Giants game. But if we look at the totality, he did last year set the franchise record for touchdown passes. But how did he do it? Well, the final game was played at Philadelphia against virtually the practice squad.
You're right. They played no one.
No one. And he threw 5 touchdown passes in that game to get to 37, which ranked 4th in the league. And you look at just the step back from that is 37 is pretty great.
It is. 37, what do you have, 37 and 11?
Yeah, and they led the league in points scored. They led the league in yards.
Gained.
And he wound up for the whole season 11th in QBR, which is obviously on the edge of the top 10, okay?
But you would think, Skip, a guy, you said he finished 11th, a guy with 37 and fewer than 12 interceptions, you would think that his QBR would be a lot higher than that.
You think he'd be top 5?
Yes!
I would agree. What happened was, to your first point, Denver happened out of nowhere. You want to talk about me getting shell-shocked and blindsided and thunderstruck by what I was watching? Your Broncos come in, and they're playing okay, but I didn't see this.
No.
The Cowboys were prohibitive favorites in the game. I think they were double-digit favorites, as I recall. And it's 30-0 Denver early in the 4th quarter. 30-0.
Right.
And Dak has a QBR at the end of the game of 19. And they go to Kansas City, he has a QBR of 9. And then the Raiders at home, he has a 43, which wasn't terrible, but they win the toss in overtime, and they just crap out. They did nothing. He did nothing. He went 3 and out.
Yeah.
And it's all of a sudden Raiders' turn to win the game. Then what do we have? He goes to Washington, and they managed to win the game. He had a QBR of 10.
Yeah.
And then the San Francisco playoff game, he's a QBR of 27. You can just see he's just tail spinning. He's nosediving to the finish line. Where was that? Is it because he wasn't in shape and now he's in the best shape of his life? Well, it's all I got to hang my helmet on at this point is I got to believe he just sort of hit the wall, hit the physical wall. Well, maybe this year he won't hit the physical wall. So my point to you is I have seen stretches of maybe top 5 play. I've seen stretches.
Yeah.
I've seen proof of it, that he's capable of doing that.
Yeah.
But I don't see it in the biggest picture because...
You don't see it consistent enough.
Well, again, these anonymous quoters here are talking about consistency. Well, isn't it just the opposite?
Yeah, it absolutely is the opposite. Hence, why they always muddling around. There's a reason why they haven't. If he's so consistent, if they're so consistent, shouldn't they get past the first round? I mean, they lose their first. I mean, they did one time. They got past Seattle, but the divisional round, they had the divisional round against the first game against Green Bay. They lose. Last year, 49ers, they lose in the wild card.
Okay, so Dak's won 1 playoff game, which was at home. It was a good game.
So he's 1-3, right?
He's 1-3, and in that game, he was really good down the stretch. He clutched up and had a big 3rd down run, as you call a quarterback draw run, and then scored himself on the next play from the 1-yard line to win the game 24-22. That's all I got. That's all. In 1 playoff game going into your 7th year, it shouldn't get you in the top 10, right? Shouldn't you have a little more postseason resume to back you up?
You would think. But I'm trying to, I don't think anybody thinks that he should be higher. I think the majority of the people will think, even the Cowboys fans think that he should be lower.
I will admit, as a lifelong diehard Dallas Cowboy fan, when my eyes lit upon Dak Prescott 10th, I was shocked. And you could argue I was pleasantly shocked because I'd like to believe that that's going to happen this year.
Right.
But I was shocked nonetheless. I'm much more of a Lamar fan than you are.
Right. But I still think Lamar is better than Dak.
I can't make the case. Lamar Jackson ended up having a quote-unquote bad year last year. They were the most injured team in football.
Right.
You know it, and I know it.
But Skip, before he started dealing with those injuries, They were the number 1 seed in the AFC.
They were. Okay?
He did that.
Okay, but he missed the last 6-odd games
Yes.
with an ankle injury, and all of a sudden it's out of sight, out of mind, so he doesn't make even 10th. Shannon, he won the MVP. He's got that
unanimously.
On his resume is the MVP of the NFL. Well, Dak has never come close to winning the MVP, so how can you do that? What is it about Lamar? And it doesn't speak well for Lamar now that he's representing himself, trying to get his money, right? Well, doesn't he deserve at least as much money as Dak Prescott got?
Yeah,
and
but
it's starting to feel like he's not going to get it.
He's looking at the guy that's number 9, though. He's looking at that. And Steve Bisciotti is like, I cannot believe Deshaun Watson. I cannot believe Jimmy and D. Haslam did this to us. Because first of all, there are other quarterbacks that's going to be coming up. Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert. It's coming down, and Russell Wilson wants an extension. What do you think they're looking at? You don't think Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert's like, hold on, that's the ceiling. I mean, that's the floor. Is 230 fully guaranteed?
Yep.
And Lamar Jackson is like, did you hear what Skip said on Undisputed? He said, I want an MVP. He said, I've been in the league less than you, and I've got just as many playoff wins as you.
Okay, so bottom line to this Dak discussion, I believe he can play like a top 10 quarter. I believe he has the capability of doing that. But his seat is growing hotter and hotter because next year, this year, coming up, he no longer has Amari. It's CD or bust. There's no Cedric Wilson.
Right.
He's lost 2 of his security blankets.
And Gallup probably going to start on PUP.
Probably. And I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't come back for 8 games, right?
Right.
So now we see what you're really made of. And trust me, I just got a pretty good sense of Cowboy Nation. It's sitting right on the fence with Dak Prescott right now, waiting to see, can you do this more by yourself? Because Zeke is a shell of himself to me. I don't expect much from Zeke this year. Okay.
Oh, you finally give it up on Zeke?
Well, I'd like to expect that Tony Pollard could take up some slack there.
Right.
But Zeke, no. So all of a sudden, we've seen Dak without Zeke before. Well, now if you're completely without Zeke, what you got, big fella?
Well, you better show you top 10 without Zeke.
You better. That is correct. Here we go.
We finally agree.
Thank you for watching. You can subscribe here to get the latest from the show, and be sure to check out more of the best clips from Undisputed, or go watch a few other segments from our other shows on FS1.